Just talk to us a little bit about the immediate challenges that most of the refugees get as soon as they get into the country. We know there is things like employability, which is like the immediate problem, but of course, language barrier. Imagine moving into a country like, say, Ethiopia, and maybe you're not equipped with English or Swahili, and they also equally don't speak Swahili. So ukiingia pale Amharic kidogo, it becomes a problem. Talk to us about some of the issues most of the refugees immediately meet as soon as they get to Kenya.
Most of the refugees, the biggest challenge that we face most of the time is that kwanza, it's the language. Yeah. Once you get to a country that speaks a different language that you don't understand, it's very difficult for you to even converse or communicate with anybody. Yeah. And so that makes life even much more harder because you do not know where to go if you want something or you want to access certain service or even wanting to report yourself to the authorities. It is very difficult to tell someone that, can you please kindly, where is the police station, or what department is in charge of refugees in Kenya and all that. So that is one thing that is very difficult. The language, not only in terms of one coming to Kenya, but also even when it comes to the integration of the refugees into the education system. Yeah, it is very difficult for the refugee child who maybe is in standard 8 in his country of origin. When they come to Kenya here, it is very difficult for them to be accepted in that same class. Why? Because the language is totally different, and so sometimes they've been taken down to maybe, let's say, to the lower primary. They start from there. You can imagine that is a very big
it is
difference. Yeah. And so that's a big problem even in the job market. Yeah, in the labor markets. Yeah, we have certificates. A lot of refugees are professionals, by the way, but because of the language barrier, they can't be able to integrate into the labor market of Kenya, of which can be contributors to the Kenyan economy. Unfortunately, because of the language barrier and because the certificates are not equated, so that makes it difficult for them to kind of like do job, to work the jobs that they were doing that they know how to do best, but they can't do them. That's why they result to selling vitenge and ngumus. Yes. So the other challenge that most of our refugees face when they come to Kenya immediately is, where do we settle? Yeah, where do we go from here? And that's why you'll find that if you go along the street right now, by there you'll be surprised that there are also refugees on the streets. Yeah, you'll be surprised there are refugees on the street with their children because they don't know the language. The only way out for them is, okay, now that we are here and don't know what to do, let's beg. Yeah, let's be on the street and beg, because they don't know where to go. Nobody has directed them. Nobody has done what and all this thing. Yeah, so this is another challenge that we are facing as the refugee community. The other thing also from the people who are the landlords and all, another big problem that we, yeah, the landlords are kind of like very kind of selective, right? If you don't speak the language, it's very difficult to kind of rent for you a house, even if it's a house of 2K, can get to a 2K. If someone who don't speak the language goes and
they
asks,
still
okay,
don't want to rent out to you.
they either don't want to rent it to you, or the price will be kind of like triple. Yes. So these are some of the challenges that we face as the refugees community.
There's quite a few. Even taking advantage of people who are already in a time of crisis is, quite terrible. But when you think of how work is being done to make sure that refugee rights are taken care of, sometimes there's what we see and then there's what's happening behind the scenes. Mongwe, what advocacy is going on for refugee rights in Kenya? Is there any progress that's been made? I know you said from the 90s, that's when, we started really seeing a crisis. What progress has happened over the last maybe 30 years, and what's being done right now?
So far, we have made a lot of strides. We started having refugees. Okay, interestingly, we've had refugees since independence. Kenya has had refugees since independence. But the huge influx of refugees that we started having at a point where we had a refugee crisis as a country happened in the early 90s when during the fall of Siad Barre in Somalia, and we had a huge number of people coming in to Kenya from Somalia, and that is when the Dadaab refugee camp was opened. And at that particular point, Kenya was overwhelmed. We were having our own challenges as a third world country, and UNHCR stepped in, and it was doing refugee management then. But then now, we come to 2006, where Kenya established its first law governing refugees, the Refugees Act of 2006. And a lot of strides have been made in terms of documentation. You know, it was basically Kenya putting its house in order. Then we come again to 2021. The 2006 law was repealed. We have the Refugees Act of 2021. And with it, we have seen even greater strides. Because now what we're seeing with the government especially is that it is trying to streamline refugee management. And it is trying to even the plane. Because having all this, during this time, the government is changing hands. We're having a different regime with different principles, with different beliefs. So that also translates to what is on the ground. But due to now years of advocacy that we have done to advocate for the rights of refugees with organizations like Kituo cha Sheria, this year in September, we had the refugee ID being gazetted. And that is a huge milestone for refugees because you're able now as a refugee to open a bank account in your name, to open an M-Pesa, to have M-Pesa in your name. You're able to get a driving license in your name, you know. You are able to get all these services in your name because previously refugees were forced to use their Kenyan friends to get these services. So you can imagine if you receive 5,000 in your M-Pesa and it goes to your friend Kamau. Kamau may demand a percentage of the share. After all, yes. After all, you're using my ID, you know. But now, with the ID being gazetted and, you know, it being basically gazetted.
It's a form of identification.
Yes, it's recognized as a form of identification that is proper for use of these services. So it is a huge milestone that we're seeing. And we really try to advocate for refugees because we are on the ground. We have paralegals. We have refugee paralegals as Kituo cha Sheria in Nairobi. We have refugee paralegals in Kakuma, in Mombasa, and even in Nakuru. So we are able to know exactly what are the challenges that refugees are facing in a particular area. Because you'll also realize that refugees in the camp and those in the urban areas, they are quite different
Very
in terms
different
of
struggles.
the challenges.
Yeah.
Yes, the struggles are very different. And some are more empowered than others. Some need a bit of, you know, more uplifting for them to get to a point where they are on the same plane as the rest of the refugees.
We have to